Hello, I'm Matt and welcome to a short hobbyist novitiate video. This time we're doing Painting Imperialis, where we paint up a Legimp model or two in our take on one of the Legion or Auxilia colour schemes. In this video I'm going to be doing the 14th Legion, the Deathguard. Grab a hot drink and a biscuit and let's dig in. The Deathguard are one of the box art factions for Legions Imperialis, and GW have a really nice tutorial for how to do their scheme. So, as loads of you have been asking for it, we decided to go for a slightly different version of the Deathguard, going for a more white and green, maybe like Mental Marine style, but still with that grime and dirt. Really grime it up and weather it down to give that taint of Nurgle. We're starting with a black undercoat and going straight for white, which you might think is a ridiculous notion. But actually we're going to use the property of the paint to really give us an advantage here. I'm using Vallejo model colour white. There are loads of equivalents, and I'm just giving them all a nice thin coat. Here on the Terminators, I am keeping the paint moving to stop it pooling. You can see me going backwards and forwards between them to make sure that no paint just really pools in the recesses. We get a nice thin, even coat. You can see by the way that white paints are, it's really quite, patchy. It shows through. So we do a second coat before we move on to a very, very thin coat of Agrax Earthshade. I've thinned it at least 1:1 with water here, maybe 2:1. You get a feel for it. If we used neat Agrax, it would just overpower the white. But it's still a very muted white undertone we're using here. We have not built up the layers to the full colour yet. Instead, we're going to use this base as essentially a base tone, and then we're going to layer white on top of it to build up the depth and layers of the colour while still making it look really grimy and nasty. So here I am just finishing that Agrax Earthshade coat, wicking away colour where it's necessary. You can see it's pooling in that rear bit and we just move it forward, keeping it going. I want this to define all the recesses and just move around the model really nicely. We're moving on to the Terminators here, and yeah, we're just keeping it moving across the model. You know the way. Stop it pooling, you move it across all the pieces, and we just keep that nice defining recess shade going. This recess shade starts to define the silhouette of the models and give us a real idea of where we're going to lay down our highlights later. It's why I'm spending a lot of time getting it right, making sure we don't just obliterate detail, but instead make the silhouette of the Terminators pop. It's going to lift our highlights out as it pushes the recesses, the shadows back. So I'm just being very careful, working here with my number 3 brush, which is what I'm doing for all the base coating and grunt work. I'm using the largest brush I can. I've just switched over to my number 0 brush to do a third coat of white. This is over the wash, it's just dried, and we're really going in to define the highlights again and lift that colour up closer to top white. If you look at weathered white in real life, it's still really bright. It's not uniformly dirty. It's the contrast that really makes it shine, almost. And that's how you get an authentic, nasty, dirty white. You've still got really bright white in places, but if it's been stained by rust and muck, it's the recesses where that all accumulates and makes it look really, really grubby. The places where it still get rained on, they still get exposed to the elements and the wind, they're still quite bright, because sun bleaches things up to a brighter colour, so they stay bright. It's that horrible, grimy nastiness that's really going to sell our dirty white here on our rhino. So yeah, just very carefully putting in all the detail here as we work. There are a lot of different surfaces on the rhino, and I'm just going to work into each one as we go with the white. Just still a very nice, thin, translucent coat, which is going to show a lot of the layers that we have put underneath it. Just working across here with that white paint. You don't need to worry too much if you go wrong. We're just slowly working. It's all white at the moment because this is our base coat, and it's such a translucent paint that an extra layer is not going to cause a huge problem. I don't know why I focus on these areas so much. I'm going to paint them green later, but I think I just want to, create a nice even white base coat to work on across the model, highlighting those upper surfaces there. The same as we would with if we were doing a conventional layering technique. That is essentially what we're doing. We're just using white as the intermediate layers because it is so translucent. We're doing the same with the Terminators here, just highlighting those panels. Again, those areas I'm actually going to paint grey later, but the Power Fist, the legs, each of those armour panels, we're going to highlight up to that bright white colour. It really sells the silhouette, even though these models are so tiny. That's what we've got to work on here. You've got to make the shapes read from a distance, even though they're very tiny models. And Games Workshop have done a great job here and given us a nice canvas to work on. Here we go with white coat number 4. It is quite a slow process, but it does have quite a nice result, giving us a lot of depth. So again, working over those flat surfaces just to really build the intensity of the white colour, where the rain would wash it clean, where wind would blow dirt off, just to really sell the contrast between those areas where grime has accumulated and the areas where it's still quite a clean white that isn't stained. Doing this also makes the shapes pop. That's the whole point of this. Just as on the Terminators, where we've been highlighting those panels, on the Rhino we're doing that too. You've got to remember this is smaller than your thumb. Even though it's a vehicle, we've got to think about the same thing of making sure that the silhouette reads well and you can understand what the parts are from a distance, so it doesn't just blur all together. That's a bit of a risk at this scale, that you lose the details. You've got to dedicate quite a lot of attention to make sure that those details really do shine. Yeah, that's what I'm doing here. These flat armor panels, just making sure that they really, really pop. We're doing exactly the same with the Terminators, bringing them up to the brightest values we possibly can. Again, focusing on those areas that I said earlier, the panels of the legs and the chests, the heads, and here we go, yeah, legs and feet. This is really important. Just the bare essentials of the Terminator form, you have to make sure they read well. So those are the areas we're taking up to the brightest values. Now we're going to lay down our other base tones. Ash and grey for the bolters across all the models. We're not going to use black because it would contrast so much with the white. I'm going to use War Flesh. You could use basically whichever green you wanted. We're just going to lay down that base tone and let the grime of the white do a lot of the talking for the model. But I quite like the desaturation of the green. I think it really has a nice crisp, elegant feel that kind of speaks to what the Deathguard used to be, despite the fact that they are well on their journey to corruption and rot. We're going to move on to doing the metallics now. For the silver, I'm using Tamiya Metallic Grey XF56. Very unpersonal name there. It's essentially the same colour as Leadbelcher. I just didn't have any Leadbelcher to hand. It's quite nice. Then we're going to move on to bronze. I am using Warplock Bronze for the base coat here. And I'm also using a rather ratty 4/0. I couldn't find my nice 4/0 brush as I was doing this. Just putting in the trim, which is really going to make these Terminators pop. We're going to come back and highlight the Warplock Bronze with a brighter layer of bronze later once we've washed them. We're just laying that down quite carefully because it will give us a nice contrast to the very flat values of our matte colours. Just working along the trim there, you can see how wonky that brush is. Cool, we're going to recess shade that with raw Agrax Earthshade. We're not going to wash it down this time. Go across those grey bits I mentioned, like giving them a bit of a depth. That's all we're going to do with the grey. It works. It gives us a nice quick way to get to that definition that we wouldn't have otherwise. I've tracked down my nice 4/0. We're going to just put in the last bits of trim with Rune Lord Brass. Yeah, there we go. I'm very happy with these Deathguard. I think I'm actually going to keep them, maybe grow them into a small secondary force alongside my Thousand Sons. You know, who knows, maybe they'll just stay as the little pair. Except, there's another technique I've always wanted to try for, you know, grinding it up and weathering it down for our tanks. So what we're going to do is paint this tank as if it was bare metal. We're going to start with dry bark. I'm back with my number 3 brush here, just laying down that base coat. Even with the really small models, always use the largest brush you can. It just means that your brushes are going to stay nice for longer, because the larger the brush, the more hardy it is. So yeah, just laying down a dryad bark. Now I'm going to dry brush this with Iron Breaker, which puts that metallic sheen back in. What we're trying to paint here is just a rusty tank. And so, yeah, we're putting in the metal. This is going to go on all our exposed surfaces, those where the oxide is rubbed off, and all the lower surfaces, they're going to stay brown. Now, we're just going to jab it with dry Riser Rust. Riser Rust is a dry brush paint. It's supposed to do this, but instead of dry brushing it, we're poking it, because we don't want the orange of the rust to be on the highest surfaces. Instead, we want it on a random patina across the surface. We're not going in too harsh with it. We're really just jabbing it, and you can see that orange color, that real like oxide brown starting to spread over the model. This could very easily be a wreck on a battlefield with all the paint blasted off. That is something you could very viably use this technique for. I would use something very similar if that's what I was going to do. But actually, this is going to be an underpaint. The next thing we're going to do, after we've done all this jabby and oranged it up a little bit, very subtly, is we are going to apply a mask. So what we're doing here is just with plain water, very loosely, we're painting everywhere that we think the paint is going to get worn off, it's going to chip. Focusing on those recesses, anywhere that we want some nice paint chipping. And then we're sprinkling just table salt, plain table salt on it. It's going to dissolve slightly wherever we've put water, moving it around here, clearing off, and stick. As we let the water evaporate off, that salt is going to stick to our model. Now, I've let it dry and I'm coming in later and I'm just brushing it away where I think there's a bit too much. But I want to leave a decent amount on there, because as we spray it down now with white, anywhere the salt has stuck, that's not going to get painted, and it's going to give us a nice random paint chipping effect and show through that underpainting that we've done. Now, we're building up to the moment of truth as we put on this last coat of white here. This would work with a rattle can, I think. You just have to fold it quite far away so you're not blasting the salt with high pressure. Now, we've brushed that salt away and it's left us nice random chipping. You can see it across the back and the side there. We're just using a very thin coat of Agrax Earthshade, something like 2:1, 3:1, maybe even 4:1. We really do not want this to overpower our white, but we're just putting in that shading, that grime, just to tie it all together. Now, same metallic as we did before with the Tamiya metallics. We're just putting it in on Dozer Blade, on the tracks, anything we want to be silver. Warp Block Bronze on the stacks, just to give them a nice contrast to the rest of the metals. Doing this, having 2 tones of metallics can really take your models to a new level without much extra work. Here we're putting neat Agrax Earthshade around on the tracks and around the base of the model. It really muckies up the Rhino and just makes it look so grimy that it's been trudging through mud. And around the bottom, it's not as overpowering. We're just making sure that we feather the edge so it is not really obvious that it's just a splodge of paint. So there you go. I think you can see I'm working it around with the brush. I'm not just splodging it on, I'm feathering it. And there we go, here they are all together. And you can see actually, there's not a stark difference between the 2 rhinos. You can mix and match these techniques. You don't need to do it across your entire army. You can just pick certain vehicles that you want to look nastier and muckier and more decayed. Give it a go on your infantry too, and then let us know how it goes. I really want to push this technique a bit more, because it's used to be around a bit, but has fallen out of use. Yeah, let us know how it goes.